Okay, so you've heard of Zynga. So back in September, I was at this conference. Mark Pincus from Zynga spoke about, this idea that he had, that we're in the app economy. Oh, signs that you're short, I guess. I'll steal that one. We're in the app economy. That's something very easy for Pincus to say, given that, he's resting on the shoulders of a giant like Facebook, but seeing how he's grown something like 230 million users at this point, more than half of Facebook's users, it's kind of an insight into how, not just how we're, playing games online, but really how we're consuming media. So when I think about being an app and the state of this app economy, I don't necessarily think of what you can build on top of Twitter or on top of Facebook or on top of the iPad or the iPhone, although those are ways. I think about the state of being an app, which is the condition of not only allowing but profiting off of distributing your content. That's something that newspapers haven't been able to kind of do yet. As a giant platform, you rest on that platform to kind of distribute your media, the way that social games do, and you also make money off of it. With a platform app structure, we visit one place to get news from a lot of sources. So this is actually something that's kind of a Darwinistic problem and solution. We don't go to we don't go to NewYorkTimes.com as much as we did, or any news site to find our news. We find our news through Twitter, we find our news through Facebook, we find our news through Google, and sometimes we read a headline, sometimes we read the whole story, sometimes we read a snippet that was linked to from somewhere else. But us as consumers, we don't necessarily check or want to find out who exactly was the source of that content. Sometimes we do, but basically we just consume it in this way that is the easiest way for us to consume, which is through these bigger platforms. Social games have been able to profit off of this model, and that's because they have organic revenue streams attached to it. So in the case of Zynga, you attach virtual goods to a game, and you can play a game for free, but then you pay I don't know how much money to buy a cow for your farm. You can't really buy a cow when you're reading an article and have that improve your article reading experience, unfortunately. So that's definitely a problem. So what they've been able to do is instead of building their own site and being their own platform, they're really resting on a destination like Facebook or like Twitter or another platform to draw a crowd, to let them draw the crowd, and then they build the content that lives on that platform. So platform and apps has really kind of been the way that we've been recently consuming news and consuming content on the web and on these devices. And the iPad is actually a great example of a good way in which we have one thing that we're going to be consuming news from various sources. So to survive in this new economy, take this with a grain of salt because this is my argument, but I believe newspapers really need to think of themselves like apps. They need to really consider not worrying so much about curtailing their content and its distribution, but finding ways to make money off of that spread and wanting to spread that content. But newspapers don't play the same games that social games play. Like I was saying, they are their own platforms. Whoa. Okay. Whoa. Okay. So the way that a newspaper works, like when you're in, if this can work with me, when you're on the New York Times, you have an article, you have ads surrounding that article, and if you land on that page, then they make money off of the ad, the impressions that it gets served for you. But if you don't actually land on this page, if you saw, just a headline or a snippet from this article, then you don't land here. And so New York Times doesn't make money off of you. And so this is a big point. This is a big pain point for newspapers, basically, because, then, readers would pay would pay for an entire newspaper or, purchase their content online, whether they read the whole thing or not. And now readers find stories through various sources and, without having to necessarily pay the news publisher. And the financial models that would allow these newspapers to take advantage of having their content exist everywhere just don't exist yet. So this is an example of, if you do a Google search for a certain headline for the same type of news that we just saw on, for the oil spill, let's say, then you could see yourself maybe scanning through these headlines and scanning through the snippets and then maybe clicking on one, but sometimes you can digest a lot of news through just these, aggregator sort of platforms. So at the same conference that I was at, that Pincus said that we were in an app economy, there was actually this very heated argument that went on between various journalistic and tech entities that, and the New York Times SVP of digital operations basically said that Google is spreading promiscuity, basically calling Google a slut. I don't necessarily agree with him. I actually think, Google is obviously responding to the ways in which we're consuming content. And if you want to call them a slut, then what the next person to call a slut is probably Facebook and Twitter and the iPad, for instance. All of these means in which we consume content from various sources. So rather than curtailing the spread of content, why don't we work towards redefining a means to profit off of this spread? Yes, this is daunting, but is this a new concept? Not really. I used to work for a company named Mochi. I actually have one of my colleagues here. And Mochi basically started, the idea that it started with is that the concept of providing tools for independent game developers to package inside of their games, to have package ads inside of their games, sorry. So basically, before models like this came out, what would happen is the same thing that newspapers are facing. You'd have a game appear. On a web page, have ads surrounding it. But if somebody really liked that game, so basically, if it was successful, they would take that game, put it on another site, and then whoever owned that page would make the money off of the ads. And so game developers were afraid of basically being successful because the more your content would spread, the farther you were from making the money off of it. So the idea was to package ads inside of the games, and now the company has grown to actually, do things like virtual goods as well. But the philosophy behind it was basically, instead of being afraid of your content spreading, let's try to find creative ways to make money off of spreading it so that you want it to spread as far and wide as possible, because that means you're going to be far more successful and your users are going to be happy. The closest thing that newspaper industry has come to with regards to this are paywalls. And I put a little yawn there because I feel like this is kind of like, this is maybe a baby step, but it's not really a solution. Basically, paywalls are, who here is familiar with the paywall concept? Okay, so a paywall basically is something that the Wall Street Journal has actually been using it for about 10 years now, and they've been successful with it because they started early. But basically, it's a way to let the user pay before actually seeing the content. So it is a way of attaching revenue to a piece of content or to a newspaper, but it doesn't really have that embedded philosophy of really wanting it to spread. The idea is to limit it to whoever wants to pay for it up front versus trying to find ways to make money off of spreading it. So how about attaching a revenue source to an actual piece of news content so that it can thrive in external environments, the way that we do with games and video? It's not such a simple question. The technology is not there, and the actual revenue streams or revenue models or business models aren't really there. With gaming, it's virtual currency, virtual goods and things like that are more organic means of making money. With text content, you don't really have those means of making money. So this is just a more of a problem. We don't really have a solution for this yet. Because consumers really will expect the news to find them, not the other way around. This is not the way, this isn't something new. The concept hasn't really changed. People expected their newspaper to greet them at their doorstep. This keeps doing that. Newspapers will just need to reach their audiences in their new doorsteps. So before we even wake up in the morning, we don't open the door to get our newspaper. We actually get on our mobile phones and check Twitter, check Facebook, check wherever we go to get our news. So that's where they need to be. So if you're not okay with your content living elsewhere, you're just no longer okay. And if you're trying to, curtail that spread, it's kind of like holding back, or trying to create a dam.